Hey everyone, this is BlendMaster here with another tutorial, and recently I've been working on creating this image inside of Blender. I wanted to create some donuts, and I also worked on creating this wood floor inside of Blender. And it was requested that I show you guys how to create this wood floor. So that's what I'm going to teach you guys today. So let's get started. First thing I'm going to do is name this scene because we're going to be using multiple scenes, and we want to stay organized. So I'm just going to name this wood texture. And I'll add another scene and name it wood tiles, and then I'll add another scene and just name it test scene. So let's go back to our wood texture scene, and what we want to do here is delete our cube and our lamp, and we'll add a plane and scale it up by 5. Now I'm just going to go to top view, orthographic view, and snap our camera to view, and I'm just going to switch the resolution to 1920 by 1920 and zoom out until our plane fits perfectly inside our camera view like that. Just going to zoom in a little bit, and that's good. Now what we're going to do is create the texture. So select our plane, go to the material settings and add a new material. We're going to set it to shadeless. Then we'll go over to the texture panel, add a new texture, and click on color ramp. We're going to make the first color a dark brown color like that. Make the second color a light brown tan color like this. Okay, that's looking good. I'm going to switch it from texture to both so you can see what's happening. I'm also going to switch over from solid view to rendered view. I'm going to come down here, set the size from 0.25 to 0.5, and I will change the size of our texture on the y-axis. I'll switch it to 25. You can see we're starting to get this nice wood effect pattern. Now what we're going to do is add another texture on top of this and switch it to wood. And we're going to open up the color ramp again. In this first color we're going to make it a light tan color like that, and the second one will be white. And I'm going to switch it from bands to rings, and I'll switch the blend type from mix to multiply. You can see that it's darkening our image, and that's exactly what we want. You can play around with this color so you get something you want that looks better. I'm gonna leave it like this for now, and I'm also going to switch it from rings to ring noise to get some distortion, but I'm going to bring down the turbulence to, let's say, 0.3 or maybe just 1. Yep, that's looking good. And I'm just going to tab out into, or go to solid view and come over here and add a UV map. We'll name this ring 1. And I'll just tab into edit mode, go to top view and press U, project from view, bounds, and we're going to open up another window here and switch it to the UV image editor. And if we go into rendered view and go back to our texture panel, I'll switch the mapping coordinates from generated to UV and select the ring 1 UV map. And now if we move this, you can see that it's moving our rings. And I want to get the center of our ring up here, so I'm just going to move this down like that. And that's looking good. And I also want to squash it down, so to do that I'm going to scale it up on the y-axis. It's too much. Scale it down some more. Maybe a little more. Okay. And then I'll just move this down a little bit so that it'll go up. Move it over. And you can really just play with the positioning to get whatever you want. Okay, I'll tab out of edit mode. I'm going to add another UV map and name this ring 2. Okay, and now we'll go back to our texture panel I'm going to come over to the next layer and click texture 1 again, but I'm going to press this 2 button so it creates a new texture that we can edit without affecting the previous one. And we're going to come down to coordinates, switch it to UV, and select rings 2. And we're also going to change the blend type from mix to multiply. And now we'll come over here and just position our UV map so that the rings originate right here. Okay, and I think that looks pretty good. I'm just gonna move this other UV map a little bit, and I think that looks pretty good. So now I'll just go back to solid view and render out this image really quickly. Okay, so that's our wood texture. I think the lines are a little too dark right now, so I'll just switch that, make it a little brighter. Okay, and I'll just copy this color by pressing Ctrl C, come over here and paste it. Okay, it's good. I'll just render it out again. Now I'll just save the image by pressing F3, and I'll name it wood texture. Okay, now we'll open up our wood tiles scene, and this is where we're going to create our wood tiles. So first thing we're going to do is add our camera. I'm just going to go to camera view, or go to top view orthographic and snap it to view, and then put it in the center and move it up on the Z-axis by 10 units. Now what we want to do is add our tiles. So I'm just going to add a plane. I'm going to tab into edit mode and scale it down by 0.25 on the y-axis, or actually 0.3 on the y-axis, and scale it on the x-axis by 1.25. Okay, that's looking good. And then I'm going to add 2 array modifiers like that. I'm going to switch this relative offset to 1.01, and I'm going to add 1.01 on this one too. But what we want to make sure is that the distance between these two are the same. So I'm just going to increase that and play around with it. Okay. Maybe 1.05. Okay, and that's looking pretty good. So I'm just going to position our plane right now. And I'm going to set the first one to negative so that all of our planes go this way. And the reason I'm doing that is because I want to position our plane perfectly in this edge so that it'll be seamless. So we want the corner of our camera in the center of this square, and it looks pretty good. I'm just going to position it a little better, and I think that's good. So I'm just going to set this back to normal, and I'm going to make this one negative so it goes down. I'm going to set the bottom one to 6 and the top one to 5. Okay, and I think I might increase the bottom one to 9, I guess. And now what we want to do is make sure that all of these planes fit inside of our camera view. So I'll just tab into edit mode and select those 2 vertices. We're going to move them back on the x-axis and position it so that this space in here is perfectly in half, like that. Okay, and then what we want to do is select these bottom 2 vertices and do the same thing so that we get this plane in the middle. So just move it on the y-axis, and if you hold down shift it'll slow down the movement. Okay, so let's position it right about there, and I think that looks pretty good, but our distance here looks a little distorted. I think that's fine. Okay, so now what we're going to do is duplicate this, by pressing Shift D, and I'm just going to move that to a backup layer so we have a copy. Then I'll just apply both of these modifiers. And now what I want to do is make all of these, or I'll just select everything and press P to separate it by loose parts. I'll just switch origin to geometry. And now what I want to do is I'm going to click the camera and click this little mouse button here, so right now we can't click our camera anymore or select it. I'm just going to bring up box select, select the top row of planks and position it right about there. And I'm going to do this with all of our planks and position it in a random pattern like that, just how it would be on a normal wood floor. Okay. And you could also use this method to create bricks too, but I'm just using it to create wood tiles. Okay, so that's looking good. I'm just going to select everything and press Ctrl J, origin to geometry. I'll duplicate it and move it to another layer, just so we have a backup again. And now we want to create the material. So let's add a new material. We're going to switch over to Cycles Render, use nodes. This is going to be an image or emission shader with an image texture plugged in. So open up our wood texture, and I'm going to open up the node editor, and I'm going to add our texture coordinate node so we can plug in the UV. I'll just open up our UV image editor and open up our wood texture. Now if we go to top view, we can project everything from view like that, and we'll just scale it up. Okay, so now if we go to texture view, we can see our wooden plank texture, and it's looking pretty good, except for these side planks where you can see that it's not tiling because this isn't a tileable image. So in order to fix that, what we're going to do is select both of these planks and make it a separate object, and do that for each of the ones on the very outside. Okay. And this process might be a little bit time consuming, but it'll ensure that your final image is tileable, and you can use it for any floor or wood floor. Okay, and then we just want to, I'm just going to move this to bottom layer. We're going to move each of these outside layers to a different layer. Okay, that. 8, and then M9. Okay, and I just want to tab into edit mode and separate these again. Whoops, separate by loose parts, and origin to geometry. I'm just going to insert a keyframe really quickly, and then go to the next frame, press Alt G. Whoops, that didn't work. Okay, what's this? Did I duplicate it? Yeah, I think I duplicated it, so I'm just going to delete that. And I'll insert our keyframe again at frame 1. Go to frame 2, press Alt G, then tab into each one of them and just project it from view without moving my position. And I'll just go back and delete the keyframe for both of them. And we're going to be doing this with all of these planes. So separate by loose parts, origin to geometry, insert keyframe. On the second frame, press Alt G, and then project the UV from view, and do it again. And then go back, select both, and delete the keyframe. Okay, I'll do it one more time. Separate by loose parts, origin to geometry, insert keyframe, go to second frame, Alt G, tab into edit mode and project the UV, and then select it and project the UV again, go back, select both, then delete the keyframe. So I'm just going to pause it right now and finish the rest of the planes and then come back. Okay, so I just finished projecting the UVs for all of these planes, and I'm just going to select all those layers. If you hold shift while left clicking and dragging, it'll select multiple layers. And I'm just going to, looks like we're missing one. Did we forget to do this one? Yeah. So I'm just going to quickly do that. Move it to another layer. And separate by loose parts. Origin to geometry. Set the keyframe first. Second frame. Alt G. And then project the UVs. Project the UV. And then go back. Select both. And delete the keyframe. Okay, so I'm going to select all the layers with our outside edges, select all of the planes, and delete the keyframes just to make sure. And then I'll move it all to layer 1. Okay, and then we'll select this center plane and press Ctrl J to join everything back together. And now we can select both of the outside edges and just scale it up so that it fits with the rest of the scale of everything else. Let's just select everything and scale it down, and then just position it wherever you want the outside edges. So scale it up, position it, scale it up, and position it. And I'm just going to keep doing this for all of the outside edges. And by doing this, it ensures that the UV layout for both of them are the same, so when it cuts off, it'll perfectly match up, and it'll help make our image tileable. Okay, last one, or actually one more, and right there. Okay, so that's looking good. I'm just going to close this UV image editor, and now what we're going to do is play with our image texture. I'm just going to quickly duplicate another backup of our planes, move it to the second layer. I'm just going to tab in and separate everything by loose parts again. Or no, never mind. Actually, I'm going to select the outside and separate by selection for all of them. Okay, by selection. I'm pressing P, by the way, to bring up the separate tool. And then I'll just select everything and press separate by loose parts. And the reason why I want to keep these two together is because we're going to be adding a random node which will change the darkness and hues of our planes. And if these are two separate planes, they'll have different variations, but we want them to have the same variation. Okay, so now what we want to do is just select everything and press origin to geometry. And I'm going to add a input object info node and a color ramp node and plug in the random output. Then I'll add a color mix RGB node and plug it in. Change the mix to multiply and the factor from 0.5 to 1. I'm just going to move everything back. Then I'll add another RGB curves node right there. And now I'm just going to go into rendered view. Okay, and I'm going to change this from black and white to colors first, or yeah, I'm going to change it to a light brown color. And I don't know why this isn't working right now, but it should. It's not giving me the effect I wanted. think it's because this factor is too strong. Or nope. Let me just pause the video and I'll come back. Okay, I think I found the problem. I forgot to, oh, here's the problem. I plugged in the alpha instead of the color. Okay, fix it. Switch this back to 1, and I am going to move this back a little more. We're going to add a pink color, or orangish color, right there. I'm going to add a little pinkish color here, get brighter. Yep, and maybe a little red. Or actually maybe a deeper orange like that. I'm just going to position these equally, and right in between here I'm going to add a HueSaturation node. I'm just going to bring down the saturation to 0.75 so it's not as deep or dark. And I'm also going to decrease this factor value to 0.75. That's looking a lot better. You can see we're getting the color variation, but it's a little too brown and red for me. It looks sort of like bricks. I want to go for a yellowish color like this, or a very light brown. So to do that, I'm going to increase our greens like that, increase our blues just a little bit, and increase our reds right in between. And I'm just going to bring up our contrast a little bit so it's a brighter, right about there. I'll just close our node editor and render out this image really quickly. And there we have it, our tileable wood texture. So I'm just going to save this again, name it wood tiles. And now we'll head over to our test scene so we can test it out. You guys probably saw Blender just crashed, and unfortunately I hadn't saved, so I did not have everything completed, but I was able to get part of it recovered, so I didn't have to do much. So let's get back to this tutorial. So to create our wooden floor, I'm just going to add a plane. I'm going to scale it up by 10. And I'm also going to add a camera in front view. And I'm just going to rotate it by 45 degrees, or negative 45 degrees. Position it right at this corner. I'll go to camera view. Just move it up slightly and rotate it down. So press R and then X twice. And then I'm just positioning it like this. Okay, and I think that's looking good. I'm just going to go to top view, and I'm going to switch over to Cycles Render. I'm going to open up a window for our node editor and a window for our UV image editor. I'm just going to open up our wooden tiles texture and give our plane a new material. Let's add a emission shader. Okay, plug this in, move this diffuse shader, and then add in our texture coordinate node and our image texture, and plug in the UV and select our tile texture. I'm just going to press U, project from view, and scale it up by 10. Okay, as you can see we're getting some nice tiles and they're tiling seamlessly, so that's good. I'll just scale it up again by 2, and if we go to our camera view, that's looking pretty good. So now what we want to do is, instead of using our emission shader, we'll be using our diffuse shader. So plug in the texture into that. Okay, and right now you can't see anything because there's no light, so I'm just going to add our light. I'm going to add a environment texture, open that up, and there it is. I'm just going to leave it like this. I'm not going to move the positioning because it looks fine, and you can already start to see it's looking pretty good. I'm going to add a mix shader now and add a glossy shader, and I'll change this from 0.2 to 0.1, and I'm going to move back our image texture and the texture coordinates. I'm also going to add a HueSaturation node and change the saturation from 1 to 0.5, and that's looking better. Okay, and I'm just going to add another light, so I'm going to tab out of edit mode, add another plane, scale it by 5, rotate it by -45, rotate it by 45, and just position it right about there, move it up. And I'm just going to give that a emission shader, pure white color, and give it a strength of 5. Okay, and that's looking pretty good. So I'll select our plane again, and right now you can see it looks really flat. So to fix that, we're going to be adding a bump. So let's add a color ramp node and plug in our image into that. I'm just going to plug this into our emission shader and plug that into the surface so we can see what it looks like. Now I want to increase this contrast a lot, so I'm just going to drag in this black value like that and pull in the whites to make it stronger. Okay, and that's looking good. And then I'll just add a color mix RGB node, switch it to multiply and a factor of 1. And if we plug in our normal material and plug the multiply node into the displacement, you can see we're getting our bumps. But right now they look really harsh. So to fix that, all we have to do is darken the second color and they'll become softer. But right now there's not enough bumps, so I'm just going to plug this back into the surface and move this back so we can get some more bumps like that. Okay, I think that'll look better, so let's flip it. Yeah, and that's looking a bit better. I might decrease it a little more. Okay, might increase our roughness value to 0.2, and I think that's looking pretty good. I'm just gonna reposition this plane over here, and I might bring that strength down to 2. Yep, and that's looking pretty good, so I'm just gonna render this out right now. And there you have it. Tileable seamless wood texture for Blender that you can use to create realistic wood. I would render this out at a higher sample, probably about 100, but other than that, it's looking pretty good. So thanks for watching. I hope you learned something new. If you have any suggestions for future tutorials, feel free to leave them in the comments. And recently I just hit another milestone. I have 250 subscribers now, and I want to do another giveaway. So if you check out my Google Plus page, I'll have another poll for you guys to vote on what tutorial file that you guys would like to have. So head over to Google Plus and check that out. Thanks for watching. Bye.